In this video, we will have a close look at categorical data. We've talked about the distinction between quantitative and categorical data. A variable is quantitative if we record a meaningful value for each individual in the dataset, whereas a variable is categorical if we record a feature, an attribute, for each individual in the dataset. Nominal categorical data represents simply a feature recorded for each individual, whereas ordinal data means that we have some sort of ranking in the possible outcomes of the categorical variable. A well-known example is Likert skates, which correspond to questions where we ask individuals, do you strongly disagree, agree, or strongly agree with a particular statement? We will not discuss ordinal data further in this class. When coming across a study, you should try to imagine what the raw data looks like. In this dataset, representing survey data about UCI students, we can see that we have two categorical variables, gender and eye color, where gender has two possible outcomes, male, female, and eye color has three possible outcomes, brown, blue, and green. A categorical variable has a set of distinct outcomes. So to summarize a categorical variable, we can, for instance, count the number of individuals who have any particular outcome. This is called the frequency for that outcome. Or we can try to express this information relative to the size of the dataset by calculating a proportion or percent of individuals with that particular characteristic in the dataset. This is also called the relative frequency. Statistics goes beyond just describing data. We often want to perform some computations, and therefore we will need specific notation for different types of outcomes. For categorical data, the number of individuals with a particular feature in the dataset is expressed as the count, which is often represented by the letter X. The proportion of individuals with a particular characteristic is expressed typically by the letter P, with a distinction being made for a proportion of outcomes in the population, represented by the letter P or the Greek symbol pi, versus the proportion of a particular outcome in a sample, in which case the sample statistic is represented by the letter P with a hat on top of the letter, so that the statistic is pronounced P hat. Being able to distinguish information coming from a sample versus information about an entire population is very important in statistics, which is why it is critical to use proper notation and remember that the parameter P represents the proportion of an outcome in the population, whereas P hat represents the proportion of an outcome in a sample. Categorical data is often displayed in pie charts or bar graphs. Unlike quantitative data, the outcomes of a categorical variable can be sorted in any way we want in graphical displays. In a pie chart, the pie slices are scaled to represent the proportion of each outcome in the dataset. Therefore, all of the outcomes that make up the categorical variable must be shown inside the pie chart, and that also means that pie charts can only display one categorical variable representing one group at a time. The slices of the pie chart can be labeled either with the count or with the proportion of different outcomes in the dataset. In a bar graph, the heights of the bars indicate a summary value for each outcome displayed. When displaying categorical data, you may display all of the outcomes of one variable or just some of the outcomes of that variable. You may also display outcomes for several variables, all in the same graph. That makes bar graphs both very versatile and also very challenging to interpret. Back to our survey of UCI students, we examined the categorical variable eye color. The summary statistics displayed here represent the counts and proportions of each outcome in the sample. There were 13 students with blue eyes, 121 with brown eyes, and 11 students with green eyes, for a total of 145 students. These counts correspond to proportions of, respectively, about 9%, 83.5%, and 7.5%. We can display this information in a pie chart that would have three slices, one for each possible outcome, scaled to represent the relative frequencies for the three outcomes. The slices can be labeled with the counts or with the proportion. The same information can be displayed in a bar graph, where the height of the bars represents the relative frequency of each outcome. It's also possible to create a stacked bar graph where the outcomes are placed on top of each other, which gives an impression closer to that of a pie chart. Here's a hypothetical example designed to illustrate some of the challenges of categorical data and bar graphs. Imagine a study of 3 vegetables, carrots, peas, spinach, where we ask each participant, which do you prefer? Each participant will give us one answer, one of those 3, and we can summarize the findings with the proportion of individuals who say they prefer carrots, peas, or spinach. Those summary findings can be displayed either in a bar graph or in a pie chart because those are all the outcomes possible and all of them. Consider this instead. If the study had asked each participant, do you like carrots? With possible answers yes or no. Do you like peas? Yes or no. Do you like spinach? Yes or no. We would have 3 variables, 3 pieces of information recorded for each subject. We can summarize each variable to find out the percent who say they like that particular vegetable versus the ones who do not. Such data could also be displayed in a bar graph that would look very much like the one at the top and yet would be radically different. This bar graph would only represent part of the information on each variable, only the percent that say they do like carrots, but includes onto the same graph information for each of the 3 variables. On the other hand, the second bar graph could not be made into just one pie chart because a pie chart would only display the outcomes for one variable in one group. The fact about bar graphs is that yes, we can use a bar graph to display the outcomes of a categorical variable, but bar graphs can also be used to display anything for which the height of a bar is a visual representation for a numerical value. The bars in the bar graph may represent the outcomes for one categorical variable, or the outcomes for more than one categorical variable, or even the outcomes of one categorical variable when comparing several different groups. The bar graph may also represent only a select few of the possible outcomes if we wish to emphasize those in particular. Bar graphs are also used sometimes to represent quantitative data when the height of each bar represents the numerical value for each individual in the dataset. And bar graphs are commonly used to represent summaries for quantitative data, for example, to compare the means of a variable across different groups. So understand that bar graphs are extremely versatile, but it is exactly what makes them so challenging to interpret. When looking at a bar graph, always make sure that you thoroughly examine all aspects of the graph, but also all the detailed information that comes with the graph.